I mean, I know a lot of physicians quite advanced in their leadership careers, actually, and they're sitting in organizations and they will tell me flat out, not publicly, but privately, I'm in an organization that does not support physicians advancing in leadership.
Shocking. This just in,
shocking,
Sanjay
right?
Gupta.
I know.
I mean, I've never heard of this in my entire life.
Crazy idea, right? And then there's this radical idea coming out from this new McKinsey report, which is getting a wonderful juice because it's from McKinsey, but how late in the game are we? New specialty, the physician is a CEO. Can't help me. I was a CEO in 2008, right? And there were I was learning from physician CEOs before me. Were there tons and tons of us? No,
right.
But it's not a new idea. So the sort of fractional percentage of us speaks to the fact that there isn't a lot of systemic momentum to doing this.
Hello and welcome to the Fire Chief Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the Chief Medical Officer. I'm your host, Lee Scheinbart, and this podcast brings you the hottest and most crucial conversations in healthcare and physician leadership. Last week, we had a fascinating conversation with Dr. Larry McEvoy, who has a perspective on leadership and exponential leadership. We're going to continue our conversations in just a moment, and we're going to get further into his mind, which is a really scary place, and learn more about epidemic leadership and the future of medicine, what keeps him up at night, and how we're going to prepare for this. Larry, welcome back to the show. I appreciate you being on again.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I never come back for part two. I'm always wondering, is that a good thing, or did I maybe just like not wind it up and stay concise in part one? But here we are.
We'll let the 10 million listeners that you claim are now on our show decide about that. So remember, we were talking a lot about epidemic leadership, exponential scaling, networking. It was a lot packed into there. So if you're a new listener, you got to go back last week and listen to what Larry and I talked about. But we were really focusing on how crises have an opportunity for people's particular agendas, for bad actors in the space, and also an opportunity for folks like you and I to really push back on the disinformation, malinformation, and misinformation in the world, and begin to think about a different way of healthcare in general, particularly leadership in healthcare. Do you have any particular examples where you use that, say, at the institution that you were at, the unfunded, nearly broken hospital, or any other example for that matter of how you use this?
Yeah, we, I came into an organization new, right? So I was, as we clinicians like to say, exogenous. I was at a place where for years I knew people, I had relationships, I bumped into them in stairwells, cafeterias, ICUs. I bumped into them wearing, professional clothing, shirt and tie, et cetera, and in scrubs and pajamas, basically. So, I went from that very wired, right, humanly wired context into I'm the new guy. I'm at the top of the chart on the org chart. I'm at the box. Terrible place to be because the inputs are very limited, right? And I was really interested in understanding the place that I had entered and started talking to people and listening, and pretty quickly found some trends that weren't really positive for anybody or anything we were trying to do. There was just a lot of despair, a lot of frustration, a lot of sense of futility, a lot of sense of belief that the organization was this bureaucratic, friction-filled, gigantic paperweight of a morass, right, that kind of got in their way. Like, well, that's no good. Ask them, hey, where'd this come from? No idea. It's always been this way, right? What would you do to fix it? No idea. Above my pay grade. I just want to be a good, right, nurse, doctor, anesthesiologist, monitor clerk, whatever. I'm like, okay, I get it. So whose job is that to fix it? Mine. Can I fix it with a bullhorn, a big parking spot, and a megaphone? No. So I started thinking, how do we get
what
this
if we
to happen?
What if we paid you a really big salary like everywhere else? Could you fix it?
That would A, not work, and B, I'd have people mad at my really big salary, right? So
dang, I thought that was the solution.
Yeah. So what we did is we, for several years ahead of that, I'd been it started back in the ED. When I was a chair, I'd show up on Monday morning and I'd look at the weekend. It was bad weekend or good weekend, right? No matter how you wanted to define it, you could draw up a few things that made bad weekend or good weekends pop out. And initially I thought it was the patient load or the type of patients. And it was always instead the crew that was working. How well did they work together or not? They could handle a lot of load if they worked together well. And if they couldn't, not much load would crack them, and this is not a fun weekend, right? And things didn't go well for the patient. So I started initially thinking, oh, this is about selection. If we put Lee and Larry together, that's always a good combination. So let's schedule them.
I don't know. It might be a disaster, but keep
Don't
going
worry,
with
we
this.
have the Jekyll and Hyde version. Oh, you put Larry 2.0 and Lee 2.0 together? No. Incompetence, disaster, toxicity, no, everyone runs from them. The whole department, oncology and the ED, they all melt down. So don't put those two together. And then I started thinking about the math of it. It's like, well, wait a minute. We can't preferentially schedule all of the good combinations only. Like, we're always left with a weaker side that way. And then we have the dynamics of how come I'm getting scheduled with so-and-so and I'm always stuck with so-and-so. It's not tenable. So I started asking people in the department, hey, can you tell me a story of when you work well with somebody that you didn't initially? And they would all kind of pause for a second, but not too long, and say, oh yeah, sure. And well, tell me that story. Well, when I first saw Lee, I thought he was the biggest jerk ever.
I
And
agree.
he was too slow and he wasn't organized. And, I was perfect and he wasn't. And it just wasn't working. But, like 20 years later, I would say he's one of my best colleagues. I would do anything for the guy. If I have a sick patient or I'm up in the middle of the night, I want him there, not the opposite of him. I'm like, well, how did that happen? You work together. And it was kind of got vague after that, right? So for several years, I'd been asking people, tell yourself and whoever you're working with, in some workshop or something, the story of the time when you were under duress with your teammates and it could have gone south, but it actually turned out really well. What happened? And they really teased out over thousands and thousands of reps as I was listening and having them scrawl things and reflect upon it. There were 4 things that made things go well anywhere, anytime, any combination of people, any process. Because I asked this of lots and lots of teams, technical teams and teams that were temporary and all this stuff. And they really said there were 4 things. They said, number 1, we managed to achieve or create common ground, the reason why and how we were there, right? And sometimes that was preordained. It was mission, vision, values, but we had to either use it or make it on the fly. Principle number 2 was something like this. We learned how to have the conversation that counts the way it counts when it counted, right? No matter who it was, whatever combination was. Rule number 3 was we realized how to be better together than better separately. This idea of collective intelligence, which is designable, by the way. And humans are good at it when we're good at it. We're bad at it when we're bad at it. And then the 4th thing was we saw each other as trusted colleagues, which meant we could trust the other person, but we had to commit to being trustworthy. And I'm like, well, that's a mouthful, you guys. Like, that all happened at once? They're like, well, no. I mean, something magic happened. But now that you ask us, if you said what really happened, it was those 4 principles, 1, 2, 3, 4. We called that the trust cycle. And we basically trained people on those 4 elements and said, use them everywhere you want. And if you don't want to, don't. And some environments didn't, and they stayed snarled up, and others did. And they're like, hey, this thing works. Like, it helps us get stuff done. It helps us learn how we like to zig and zag. It helps us work long-term. It helps us work short-term. This is a good thing. So that was probably my first successful scaling experiment at what I would call an epidemic element. Things that can work anywhere, anytime, any combination that actually help you do better work.
I want to make a couple of reactions with you and see how this resonates with you or not. So one of my former colleagues in the professional space, now the CEO at Phoebe Putney in Georgia, she used to tell us in our executive meetings, we move at the speed of trust, right? I'm like, damn, that's brilliant. So how do we get to that trust equation to make it move? And you're bringing some answers. The other part of that is very, very similar to how the Navy SEALs approach their training and their experience. And the phrase is, I can trust you with my life, but can I trust you with my money or my wife? And so there's a very similar concept here is effective leaders and effective teams have trust. It's the getting there that's the hard part, and that's the learned skill. And while we talked last week about getting patients to trust us, getting our teammates and our colleagues and our staff members to trust each other and us. We are not, unfortunately, really taught that in our medical education.
Yeah.
We
I
may,
think, go ahead.
well, we may learn those things, but we are not actually taught those things. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's technique to it. I just want to go back to those four principles. I considered them so metabolically essential. We called this the trust cycle, right? Like the Krebs cycle. Like it was
Yep.
going to create that ATP of trust everywhere. And to your point, and this idea of being epidemic or exponential, it's really fantastic if you are a trustworthy physician, right? And colleagues trust you, and nurses trust you, and administrators trust you, and the public trusts you, and your patients trust you. I love that. My question is, can you scale that? Because when someone comes to the place where you work, they can't depend on one person being trustworthy. They have to trust the institution. And when they say they trust the institution or the team or the organization, they're not talking about the table or the door, right? They're talking about the ecosystem of human relationships. Will it hold at every corner? And that's what they mean by trust. And then they have trust in certain things: kindness, empathy, listening to me, thinking of my own finances, my own cost and benefit equation, and informed consent. That trust has to flow into a number of technical and non-technical domains. You can't do that by having a couple shining star leaders or super doctors or even one or two good teams. It's got to be an everywhere thing.
Yes, I mean, we have a job title, CMO, CEO, and you go to your job and do your work, but the work is what you just described:
Yeah.
creating trust, developing trust, growing trust. Totally agree. Because it only takes one human being in that organization to break that trust, and you've lost everything that everybody else has built, or
Yeah,
some
that
of it anyway.
reminds me, I say the role of leadership is to scale PLV, performance, learning, vitality. Again, any combination anywhere. But a nurse came into my office one day and she said, "You know why this works?" And I said, "I think so. I think it works because we asked all of us, when it's working, what are we doing? And when we fall off the rails, what do we stop doing?" She said, "Yeah, that's all true. But the reason this thing works so well is there's a betrayal cycle." And this goes to your idea that trust gets broken, right? I'm like, "Ooh, say more about that." She said, "Think about it. Every time we go to work and all day and all night long, it's just like DNA damage, right? Something is causing a rent in the fabric. Someone shows up late for a meeting. Did they not care? Or did their kid get really sick right as they're out the door? You don't know. But over time, you show up enough times to a meeting late, and now you can't trust that someone's coming on time. That's an observation and an accurate inference. They also say, maybe I can't trust their motivation. You can't see that, but you're making guesses. These micro processes of eroding trust, betrayal, are happening constantly all across the organization, right? And so unless you have a repair mechanism for all the things that people are seeing that could take them somewhere negative, you're going to eventually have psychic entropy in the organization. And you can't repair that psychic entropy by being individually really, really good.
Well, in oncology, when we see broken cells doing bad things, we just load it up with toxic chemicals as though as though that's a solution. Now it works, but we're in this whole era now of monoclonal antibodies and checkpoint inhibitors and CAR T cell rearrangement. We're using new ecosystem thinking to rewire the ecosystem. I
Yeah.
love this stuff. We
It's
could go on.
fascinating and brilliant.
Yeah, we're not going to make a part 3, but we could another
Thank
time.
goodness for everybody. Yeah.
All right. Let's go into a space that you hinted at, but you didn't share. So I'm going in cold here. You described you had not one, but I think 2 deep water dives regarding your own health. And would you be willing to share one or both of those experiences
Yeah,
and
I will
how they've
point out,
affected, how did they affect how you live today, day to day?
yeah. So I would just say that for all the clinical listeners out there, we know what risk profiles are like. I'm a little bizarre in that I have a really low risk for profile, right? I shouldn't get sick, but twice in my life I've gotten ill. In my 20s, I had a really bad time with ulcerative colitis, which tried to kill me. I had a colectomy with an IA pull through, and that was a pioneered procedure. It was early on. I got dehiscence and fistulas. The operation was a huge success in terms of the effect. I could get up at 4 in the morning, go do rounds, stand in the OR all day. I mean, I just had a great result, but I basically went 8 years, 30 procedures, 396 pounds of lost weight when I was a young man. I lost my 20s while I was trained to be a med student and when I was a resident as well. So I got kind of, I'd like to say, my vertical education as a physician, and I got my supine education when I was having laparotomies and drains and crawling back out of all that. So that was a blow. And then um, bizarrely, 24 months ago, I had what I thought was kind of a rotator cuff equivalent in my left hip, and it turned out to be a chondrosarcoma, rare bone tumor. Not fun. Had a radical reconstruction and resection of my femur and rebuild. I don't walk right normally anymore, which kills me because I live out in open, rugged terrain, and to me, walking is covering miles with weight on your back, 30, 40 miles in the mountains and 3, 4, 5,000 vertical. So big change in my lifestyle. You say, how's that made a difference? I think it's sharpened. People say, well, it makes you appreciate what you have. I'd say it makes you appreciate what you lost, right? It also makes you help me understand the pairing and connection between gratitude and grief. It is hard to go through those things. And if you've been a deep water patient, you know that. If you're a physician or a clinician who's paying attention to what patients go through, it's hard. And that's, to me, what healthcare is like these days, or being in the professional environment. There are a lot of things that are difficult. And I think what those episodes taught me is there is a skill set to going through difficult things, and not just surviving or white knuckling or getting through, but to get through. Again, let's think of our crisis thing, right? Those are crises for me. To create multiple positive returns off a crisis, which is not the same as emerging unscathed or not sustaining risk or having deficit or having to pay a price. But can you create positive returns is a real skill. So I emerged from that both as a younger person and again here in my late 50s. I suppose equal parts in equal measures, very grateful and appreciative and almost dismissive that I can be harmed. I mean, I've died professionally and I've almost died medically, and it's like, okay, whatever. It's going to happen. Just enjoy today, keep moving. I've become less paranoid, less anxious, less concerned about the what ifs. And there seems to be a function there. Like the more capable you feel in the moment and over time, the risks are going to pop up. So are the dents. You'll deal. And I think that's, again, a translatable capacity, as far as I can tell, into teams and organizations and populations. I would love to see humans as a species get there. And I'm not sure we're there yet. And I'm not claiming to be better than anyone else by any means. And I think the other thing, Jay or Lee, that it's done for me is it's really grounded in me, maybe the physician ethic, not just to do no harm, but to optimize every bit of positive contribution I can make, knowing I'm one small, inconsequential human being in a large pool of them, not just now, but across time. But I'm still really interested in using my time to try to be a good doctor, right? To help make things better, not just to take or to ignore or to say, I'm here, so I did something and I don't care. Because I think when I look at what people really respond to, it's those times in their life, and hopefully they have a lot of those times, and hopefully that's their way of life, being really connected to what counts, to themselves, to each other, to the things that matter. In healthcare and in this world, we spend a lot of time having to pay attention or distractedly, obliviously paying attention to things that do not count. And so my wish, I guess, for everyone that's doing physician leadership work, or that is a physician, or that's taking care of patients or raising their families, is that they get to spend their time on what really counts, and that what really counts doesn't just stop there, but keeps moving.
Thank you for sharing that. Again, packed with lessons, something we teach that I learned from a colleague at Harris Health in Houston who's moved on to a better, or not a better, but a new role out in California. He first taught me that change management is the same as grief. The Kubler-Ross: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And every change in life, either our personal life, the life of another person, a team, an organization. When things change, obviously we saw this with the pandemic. We resist. We deny it. We get angry. We get emotive about these things. And one thing as an oncologist that I was grateful, I learned that curve a long time ago before I was in medicine, even though I didn't have the words to articulate it. But it taught me a great deal about human beings, and every human being, sort of a sociopath, a psychopath, or an uber narcissist, will experience this change curve, this grief curve. And while you didn't speak to it specifically, at some level you get to acceptance. Now you can flip back into denial and anger on any given moment, on any given day. But I was able to meet patients where they're at, thinking about that curve. So you talked about the Krebs cycle. You talked about the betrayal cycle. There's the grief cycle. And the grief cycle is kind of inside almost all of us. We just don't know it. We don't always have the words for it. And learning to work with ourselves and with other people in those cycles can build so much trust, because you get where people are coming from, but you got to listen. And we've talked about listening and all that. So again, my words, not yours. Thank you for sharing. And now we got to go future facing, boss. We have dug up a lot of stuff. We got dirt piles all over now.
Yeah, we do.
All right. So we got some future facing questions in front of us. We've dug some dirt piles around and we've gotten some holes around our property. We need to build this back up and go future facing. So changing gears a little bit, Larry, what do you think the house of medicine would look like to you if more physicians were truly leading the house, notwithstanding the ecosystems we've been talking about, but if physicians were building those ecosystems, what do you think that would look like?
The short answer is better. And
A plus.
Yeah. So I got the right answer there. And by the way, the reason I hesitate on that is not because I don't believe it wholeheartedly. It's that I think that the way that that's done is really important, right? So if we take a couple caricatures of the clinician world and the physician world, let's just take the more negative caricature, right?
Do it.
Doctors as sort of super achieving experts unto themselves, telling everyone else what to do and thinking that their tribe is better than others, while ranting simultaneously against a variety of legitimate rantable causes, but making things worse merely by ranting, right? Just fill in the demons here, right? Administrators, regulators, payers, politicians, heck, throw in patients, nurse mafia, whatever, right? I mean, that version of physician leadership, I don't really think helps us at all. Takes us probably backwards to a time when that caricature had some value, right? Sort of the heroic individual physician fighting the red tape and doing the noble, Sisyphean task of fighting for the patient. I mean, it's got some romance to it, but it's got a lot of baggage that I don't think really works in this more systemic world we've been talking about. So let's just take that caricature and compare it to, or juxtapose it next to the idea, sort of maybe what I would call the ideal 21st century physician presence. So what do we really bring to the table when we're really good? Number one, an ethic of healing. And when I say healing, I don't mean woo-woo or perfect or cure everything. I mean that our orientation certainly may stand on do no harm, but it has evolved more deeply to how can we help everything we're involved with get healthier. Nominally, that was the bedside, right? The pure bedside, and the individual patient. I think that the 21st century healing ethic is pointing our skills and our volition and our healing ethic toward everything. Not that we have to be involved in everything individually, right? But if you say more physicians everywhere, leading organizations, leading teams, leading sectors, leading governmental agencies, which has traditionally happened in places like the CDC. We're now living in an era where massive government agencies are led by people who really aren't the typical cast of characters. So if you think about that healing ethic being everywhere, I really like it. And again, that ethic is not egotistical, grounded in humility. It also happens to be welcoming, as we were talking earlier in the show, about all the other skill sets and bits of contribution that can and do come from anywhere. I think, good physicians, for example, will tell you the stories they have of diagnostic or interventional ideas that came not out of their own heads, but by what Uncle Harry said at the bedside, right? Or what the spouse added 10 minutes in, or what a nurse heard or suggested. So we become a conduit for convening an ethic of healing and a dynamic of working together well to surface any and all insights and possibilities to really drive continuously improving, we'll use this sort of bureaucratic word, performance, but really impact. And then that becomes a leadership style as well, right? If you're going to get that good, that wide, that deep, or as I like to say in the organizational sense, if you're going to have an organization that can solve any problem, anytime, in any combination, whenever it pops up, then that leadership style becomes a much more fluid one. So in that sense, and then let's not forget the physician understanding of physiology, whatever our specialty is. This systemic knowledge, well translated, to me says we put those kind of physicians and clinicians everywhere. And it's not that we don't have a sustainable business, or we don't have a bottom line, or we don't handle the bureaucratic X's and O's of dealing with payer contracts, or this, that, or the other, passing the Joint Commission survey, or all that nuts and bolts stuff. But we have now a healthcare sector that's infused not just with clinical acumen, but a clinical ethos that puts the human and the well-being of humans at the beginning and the end. And the way it works creates plenty of efficiency and, is financially sustainable and all those other things that we chase after. But it's a reordering of those priorities.
Yeah, let's dissect that for a moment. There's some real power in what you just said, and then we'll do some reconstruction. So, in the beginning, I made this statement around all physicians lead and all physicians are leaders, and they are with respect to the immediate ED team, the PACU team in the infusion suite, and with the patient. But so while we're trained to lead this micro environment, we don't think about organizational macro environments as places we also can lead. To your point about sort of that cranky, ranting, dispossessed physician who's complaining about all the things that are wrong and trying to lead through that, as opposed to the physician leader whose ethos mantra is to infuse, again, using the oncologic, and infuse all of the system with this ethical true north. Yes, we have a bottom line. Yes, we have business goals, but they're not helpful if we don't keep that ethos in front of us, around us, top, bottom, everywhere, that we're all driving in the same direction. Is that a fair condensation?
Yeah, I think it's a great way to say it.
Okay. And then the next part of what is also a theme throughout this show is that effective leaders not only are exponential and ethical, but they are also managing this ecosystem, as you described, which is another way of talking about driving culture. So if you drive a culture of bottom line, then you are in the trappings of the financialization, the corporatization. We have goals, nothing wrong with goals. But if we don't have the right culture, we're going in a direction that is somewhat tangential to the house of medicine, a wholesome, holistic place of healing for all of us that work in it and all of us receiving the benefit of the house. Does that make any sense to you?
It does. And I think that, if I'm a non-clinical listener here,
we got plenty of those and we love them, by the way.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great. It's easy to ask the appropriate question. Well, come on. Isn't that a little naive? I mean, we live in a real world where there are dollars and cents, and there are elections, and there are politics, and there are, the public wants a certain thing, and we've got sort of consumer-centric trends. Yeah, I get all that, right? And I don't hear you saying the opposite of that. What I do think there's a need for that goes even beyond physician leadership in our organizations, the right kind, the right way, is what is human society really about? I mean, is it about some humans being able to commoditize others at one group's profit and the other one's loss? And too bad. That's just sort of that's the P&L way we do humanity. And there's a balance sheet, and some people are assets and
There's
some are
winners
liabilities,
and
exactly.
losers.
And that's just the way it goes.
Right.
And someone might even be quite quick about this and say, well, wait a minute, dude. You all have been talking about biology, and it's a dog-eat-dog world, and things live and things die.
Right.
And I've been asked this question before, kind of in the phrasing, is there actual stewardship in biology, or is it just this brutal live, die, eat, kill, be killed?
Well, when you
Well,
put it that way.
yeah. I mean, you can't say it's not true, right? I
Right.
mean, you and I are
Right.
temporary, but if you think about the aim of biology, amid all that tussling, all that organismal self-interest to survive, it's really to ensure the survival of the population in the present and in the future,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So I like to work with horses, live out here in the middle of nowhere in Montana, and horses are really interesting in that, like every other sort of, I suppose, self-interest, motive driven organism in biology, they think for themselves. They think of their own survival. But that's nested in an idea of herd survival. A horse can't survive alone, so they're always paying attention to the herd dynamics. So their individual jostling with that herd always fits under the sort of calculus curve of what ensures survival of this herd,
Right.
and how does survival of this herd now ensure survival of this herd in the future when the
Right.
individuals are gone. This
Right.
takes us back to the physician ethic. Do we have a right and need to make a living? Yes, we're humans. We need validation. We need the ability to pay our bills, to live a fulfilling, meaningful, enjoyable, contributive life. Those are self-interest things that are fine, but we're not going to be here forever, right? And our goal at the bedside, and hopefully over our careers, is to leave things better than we found them.
Hmm.
And what happens if that's the ethic throughout our whole society? Does it mean we don't have jobs or businesses or communities or economies? No. It probably means those economies are built on something that ensures the present and the future and actually grows, let's call it the health capital, the whole health capital of everybody now and in the future. That's a different ethic than, hey, man, people make money, they're wins and losers, and there's bleeding, and somebody else patch it up. I'm moving on.
So let's say we agree, you and I, and maybe a handful of other listeners, that yes, the goal of having an ethical house of medicine culture, my words, not yours, is the survival of many people, not just any one item or any one goal. Okay. How do we get there, though? How do we put physicians and physician colleagues and non-clinical leaders into a space and place where ethos, the better good, the greater good, that noble cause, move that culture needle? How do we do that? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to divide it into two domains, and this is a long conversation, by the way. So if you want to take, and I want to take this offline with or without colleagues, or do 42,000 podcasts on this, we can. But I'd say domain one is internal, right? I think that's within, as you call it, the house of medicine, within us as individual physicians or medical students or residents, wherever we are in our career, within our training programs, whether those are residencies or medical schools, and with regard to their selection and development, how do we ask this question? What really is the value and contribution and sustaining ethos of the house of medicine, or being a physician, or being a healer today? And I think that's got to scale, right? I have to be asking myself that question as a doctor. We have to be asking it as a practice, as an organization, as medical schools. That has to be asked at every level, because it'll play out in different ways. So that's the
Totally
internal
agree.
domain. That's the internal
Totally
domain.
agree. Okay.
What I would call the external domain is sitting adjacent to, or maybe on top of, that more fundamental internal conversation. What is the path, right? And certainly part of the path is already built, right? You can raise your hand and talk too much, as I like to say, which is what happened to me, in an organization that supports physicians getting involved. And you will go somewhere, right? You'll become a department chair, a medical director, a VPMA, a CMO, chief physician executive, commensurate with kind of the combination of your effort, the support around you, and random luck, as well as the resources that are around you. I don't, I wouldn't disavow that path. It's probably how you and I got to where we were. It was a combination of curiosity, effort, people around us helping in the right context, and boom, something happened. Um, and I think there are a number of individual physicians, increasing numbers of them, that are very intentional about that path. I don't think that's good enough, right? I think I hear from too many physicians who are early in their leadership arc, let's say first-time medical directors, or they want to be a CEO or CMO someday, and they ask a really important question that I think is the one you're asking: what's the path? How do I get there? it's platitudinous to say, well, everyone's path is different. Yeah, I get that, right?
Yeah.
It's equally
I mean,
platitudinous.
we are in the era of intentionality. We no
Yep.
longer tapped on the shoulder because we're 75 years old and like, hey, why don't you do something
Yeah, you
in
can't do
the
call anymore. So why don't you shuffle some paper and we'll
right,
give you a
right. And
title.
now
Hmm.
people and our medical students that want to get additional degrees and take on a very different path. So intentionality is here, but go to the place where you're talking of where do we go post intentionality?
Yeah. I think, again, I'm going to split this external domain into two subdomains. One is what does the physician and the physicians do? And the other one is what do organizations or entities that want more effective participation do? I think if you're a physician, it's worth getting very strategic about your path. Strategic is not the same as pre-planning everything. I know exactly how my kid will grow up kind of thing, right? Life is what it is. It's kind of a lot of windy stuff. But if you're interested in becoming a really impactful physician leader, I think designing a strategic developmental path is absolutely essential. There are kind of left brain ways to do that. By age 35, I will be XYZ. I will get this degree, attend these courses, have volunteered on X committees. I think that part of it is really important and helpful. And then I think there's the other strand in that helix, which is how do I create a network of people who can help me think about this, who can understand me, who can support me, who can connect me to others, who can help me go deeper in my internal and external journey. So these are people that can say, hey, if you're looking like the kind of person who really would excel in these kind of physician leadership / executive roles, you look more like a run the trains on time kind of operational sort of thing. Is that
Right,
accurate? Do you want
right,
to be that way? Is that your
right.
DNA? And you just want to bring it to its fullest translation and transcription, so to speak. I think having that network around you and building it over time is really, really important from the standpoint of development, support, and actually becoming a viable candidate on that game board, right? So that's the individual physician path. Where do you access that? Harder than you think, right? I mean, I know a lot of physicians quite advanced in their leadership careers, actually, and they're sitting in organizations and they will tell me flat out, not publicly, but privately, I'm in an organization that does not support physicians advancing in leadership.
Shocking. This
Yeah,
just
it's
in,
shocking, right?
Sanjay
I
Gupta.
know.
I mean, I've never heard of this in my
Yeah,
entire
it's
life.
crazy idea, right? And then there's this radical idea coming out from this new McKinsey report, which is getting a wonderful juice because it's from McKinsey, but how late into the game are we? New specialty, the physician is a CEO. Can't help me. I was a CEO in 2008, right? And I
Right,
was learning from physician CEOs before me. Were there tons and tons of us? No, but
right.
it's not a new idea. So the sort of fractional percentage of us speaks to the fact that there isn't a lot of systemic momentum to doing this. I think the sourcing firms would like to have more physician candidates. And if you talk to them, they try to prudently, right, ride the line. Well, just because you're a physician doesn't mean you're a good executive. Yeah, we know.
Right, right.
But are there advantages? Well, it helps you connect with the doctors. It gives you some vague advantage. I don't think we're fully understanding what an advantage it is if you're the right kind of leader
Yeah,
and the right kind of physician to be in these roles.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and I also think that I think there's bias out there, there is toward all people who are, quote, different, right?
yeah,
And we know all the categories.
yeah.
If you're a physician going into leadership, those old caricatures of us are played against us. I think both overtly and subliminally. I mean, it's hard to believe that. And I had that myself. It was interesting. I would be presenting to Fitch's and Moody's to defend their bond rating, right, in front of Wall Street firms, and they're
That's
like,
always a lot of fun, isn't it?
yeah, and it was a hard time, right? It's a 2008
Right?
financial. They're like, well,
Totally.
you
I've
you
been there.
don't you don't sound like a doctor. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I am a doctor. They're like, well, where'd this come from, right?
Right,
So
right.
it's possible. And by the way, I cite myself as a personal example, not as what everyone should be or could be. I think that we have to ask ourselves, where are those more systemic pathways going to come from? I think if you're an individual physician knocking on that door, you're going to be asking a lot of the good questions and you're going to be trying to move the ocean with a teaspoon.
Right.
I think we have to start thinking about how to do this with bigger building blocks via groups of physicians, groups of organizations, groups of, let's just call them physician-oriented allies, nurses,
Totally
administrators,
agree. We
policymakers, et
we have
cetera.
to get off this hero boulder pushing notion and move towards, a team. It's a team sport, and we need lots of different players on the team to make that
Yep. And
happen.
then the levers for that, the spaces where that has to be clear are multiple. I can tell you, and this is no secret, and nothing I'm ashamed to say. When I was a physician CEO, I got emails by the day. Come work for us. Here's this job for you, right?
Yeah, yeah,
When I went dark and stepped out of that job to get better, by the way, at what I think my real role is in life, not only did those emails stop, the doors closed to my
yep,
being eligible.
yep,
Now, I really think that makes sense from an emergency medicine perspective. If I've not been intubating people for, you know, 2 years, 4 years, 8 years, 10 years, 50 years, those technical skills decay.
right,
I think leadership skills decay if you don't lose them as well, but you don't forget how to be a systemic executive leader in a couple of years while you're doing things any more than a football coach who's a commentator is in the booth for a year or two and then goes back to the field.
yeah,
And
yeah,
there's that notion that if you're in the job, everybody wants you because there aren't enough candidates. But I don't know that we see the talent or the potential that is out there and could be there.
yeah,
And I'll back that up by saying, as an executive, one of the things I enjoyed most was helping our organization invest in hidden and unknown talent.
yeah,
And I have to say that hidden and unknown talent, selected well and supported well, is flat out outperformed.
right,
Which is, I guess, a long way of saying I think we need some new actors on the stage, both in building the pipeline
yeah,
and in doing the selecting and in pushing the envelope. When I say pushing the envelope from a physician perspective or a candidate perspective, it's not to say I'm a doctor, I should be a CEO.
yeah.
Do the work, right? I mean, invest in yourself, do the development, et cetera. But we have to stop thinking, especially in the world we're living in now, where the rules are all upside down, which presents unbelievable positive and negative opportunities. Let's get going here.
There's a book. It's entitled "What Got You Here Won't Get You There," and it's
Yeah,
that design thinking. All of the designs, all the rules are changing. So what got us into this place called the House of Medicine is not what's going to get us to the place in the future. So I have
right.
two important questions. Well, really one, and then sort of a generic ask. So is there anything that you're afraid of right now regarding U.S. healthcare? Something that keeps you awake at night?
Yeah, and I think it probably parallels the same thing that concerns me about our societies worldwide. I like to think big and then down to small, right? So we'll look at the body and then we'll get down to the cells and the DNA and the mitochondria. And that big thing is that I think we're at risk of commoditizing humans to deliver what I might call a more abstract notion of wealth or achievement, right? And I don't think that's a good idea. I think that societies exist by and for humans in relationship with the other elements on this planet. Whether we know it or not, without oxygen, we're dead. Without clean water, we're dead. Without gravity, we're dead, right? And so we've been living on this place so long, it's just automatic, right? It'll always be there. It'll always be fine. It's like people we see with their health, right? I didn't know I could get sick, really. While I stand here every day as a doctor, I can tell you they come raining out of the sky with surprising sick heads. This is not a slight risk, baby, right?
Yeah,
You're on a temporary spaceship called your body. And if you take good care of it, you still can get whacked, see me, right? And if you don't take care of it, you will get whacked sooner, harder, and you will linger before you
yeah.
die sooner. But that's not, people don't think that way, right? So what concerns me maybe about medicine and healthcare and humans in general is we look like we're in an era that if you can get this, that, or the other done and whip up a media frenzy about it, you get a lot of support for that and people think it's good or they argue about it, but it keeps happening. I'd like to see a world where the health of everybody is recognized and understood as what drives everything else. Economies, education, startups, entrepreneurship, innovation, uh,
Hey,
safety,
Larry,
right? All that stuff.
don't try to have too many goals in life. I mean, reorienting
Well, you're not
humans
telling me
is,
how to do it, right? So,
yeah,
so, so anyway, in healthcare, we see that, right? We see this kind of mechanization and
yeah,
industrialization of healthcare. And I don't want anyone to hear me say you shouldn't have a sustainable business or sustainable bottom line, or you shouldn't have a complex organization. But you can have a complex organization that is organic and sustainable and healthy, and you can have one that's a bunch of nuts and bolts that puts out a bunch of toxic exhaust. I worry about healthcare going the second route.
yeah, yeah,
And I mean, I guess I can say credibly, having been ill twice myself as a patient and helped a lot of patients and families because of my jobs and roles get through this. It ain't working well right now in that
There,
respect.
yeah, you know, most physicians, not all, but most, at some point experience sort of this epiphany, the joy of medicine, the joy of practicing, the joy of the human connection. It's intangible. You cannot articulate it in words. It touches those inner deep, centuries old things within us. And we also experience the pain, the loss, the grief. We talked about grief cycle. And you know, Milton Friedman is so heavily quoted, as that the primary goal of a business is to return profit. And it has become a leading, a fulcrum for a
Yeah.
lot of things regarding achievements and metrics and goals. But what if wealth was for the greater good? What if, and there are business leaders out there, and I know them, and I'm sure you know them, whose entire purpose is to generate wealth, to pour it back into the places where it belongs, to create joy, to manage pain, to deal with human centeredness, human connectivity. And so, while I'm teasing you about your goal, it's not that far off, and people do it. We just need to begin to shift. You know, to 51.2% of human society to understand that there are other ways that we can behave relative to, um, building up our portfolio, building up our wealth, but then doing it in a way that all boats rise instead of just a few.
And
Anyhow,
I'd like to just comment on that. I suspect some people hearing you may be thinking this is a capitalism versus socialism,
hell no.
kind of political economic argument. I'm thinking actually this is a health oriented financial calculus in a way, right? Because if you take Milton Friedman's argument, I wouldn't disagree. I would just say let's define profit. Let's define total return on the activity of business, right? Businesses, in order to survive, require healthy economic substrates, right? Micro and macro. That's why we're always trying to invest in our business environment. Health is the same way. I would simply say that a healthy economy and a healthy business environment is a subset of a healthy health environment. And I'm not,
A healthy population drives health and wealth for everybody.
yeah, they start more businesses, they create more jobs, they have less health expenditures. And I
Right,
think this is another piece of the physician leadership domain. I don't think people are quite understanding the economics of unhealth.
right.
And don't get me wrong, I agree with you. I don't think life is merely about financial economics. I think it might be about total health economics, if you will. But the cost, let's just talk about financial cost. The cost of unhealth is so staggering, and the benefits of societal health are so overwhelming. I don't know that we as physicians understand how to make that argument very well yet. And I
We
don't
don't.
know that the, let's just fill in the blanks here, voters, policymakers, folks that turn the big wheels, media, really understand healthcare the way we do and compare an economic and a human argument that are not in tension at all. These are convergent arguments.
Yeah,
And there's some
yeah,
people out there that are doing wonderful, wonderful work in this area. I think we need to do more.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And the perversion is that one man's cost is another man's treasure. So if I'm spending some money, somebody's money, to manage some terrible, awful, chronic, gross situation from somebody's background, their conditions, their access, all of that. Somebody's receiving that cost. Someone is getting that money. It is not a zero sum game, in my opinion. And what ends up happening is that regulatory capture, that movement of the cost, makes some people or some organizations individually wealthy at the cost of other people. And so what we need to do is extract that cost equation so that people are not abusing that flow through of money. And I know that's a crazy, most people won't understand what I just said, and I apologize, but it's a perverse incentive rather than a lofty incentive. We can
Yeah.
generate more well-being for everybody if we reduce these unnecessary costs that are going into the pockets of people over here. And then everybody is better off, blah, blah, blah. And I agree. This is not socialism, communism. This is just a way of rethinking how things ought to be, defined and managed accordingly. And look, at the end of the day, there are a lot of people for 20, 30 years who've talked about we should be measuring quality, safety, risk, and these are the goals of health systems. And all of those things talk about reversing that perversion. And now the table stakes is you're only going to go to the best group in town. You're only going to go to the best physicians around. They're the most cost effective. Everybody wins. Everything is distributed well. That would be a real hell of a way to move some physicians who don't understand. Like, don't you want to be the best at what you do at the lowest cost? So anyway, we're going off on a tangent. Last question, or series of items. What are you working on these days? What do you want folks out there to know about? What are your ongoing projects?
I think, well, I'll give you, I'll give you a couple, I guess.
All right, out of a
I'll give
couple
you,
out of how many?
yeah, I'll
Give
give you
us
three.
the numerator and
Yeah.
denominator here.
I'm not going to talk about the denominator of unspoken ideas. I guess I've got three things that might be interesting to people. One, I started as an emergency physician. I always viewed my job as an executive or as a physician to create healthy whatever I was involved with, whether it was an organization or the 52-year-old with chest pain in front of me. So my family and I bought some really degraded, in need of resuscitation land about 30 years ago. And you say, well, come on, what is this on this podcast for? I just have to say, we bought it to help it get healthy again, because it's just an itch we have. And I have to say, it's been absolutely revelatory, unsurprising. I guess like my doctor and CEO roles, if you go to work as a doctor or an exec, you're going to see some things that amaze you, right? And that you're part of them. And then some things happen way beyond your control. You're like, wow, it's just amazing to be here watching this and even be part of it. And so the same way with this land, I knew it would get healthier if we took care of it. What has happened here has been for me an unbelievably underscored, bold, italicized lesson in the resurgence of capacity when you invest in health. It's gotten so much healthier, so much faster. Where there were dry gullies, there are now streams. Our biodiversity's gone crazy. Our productivity, right? The ability to create grass and, seed and fruit and food and feed has just gone crazy. So that's something I'm interested in, helping people think about, certainly with land itself, but also in communities and schools and whatever. So that's one. Another thing I'm investing more and more in. I spent a lot of time and was interested in helping boards and executives really think about the kind of stuff we were talking about today. And I don't know that there's as much curiosity there as I'd like. So I'm really now I'm moving a lot of my time to what I would call younger or emerging leaders, people who are saying, me being good at my job isn't enough for me. I really want to make a contribution, and I want to make it in a bigger way than I can currently think of. How do I do that? Who do I talk to? Where do I start? And so I'm pivoting a lot of my work toward that, with the idea, not that I have everything to teach, but I have an experience to share that can be helpful. And I've got some technique and method that might save people some of the time that I wish I'd been able to save as I sort of figured out the School of Hard Knocks. And consistent with this epidemic leadership idea, um, my son and I have created a software platform aided by AI that supports leadership and team skill and the kind of interaction patterns that drive performance, results, metrics, that kind of thing, as well as, hey, this is fun. I'm getting better. I like working with these people. I want to come back. My energy's flowing back into me. And that's probably where most of my practical time is going these days and it's fun because he's a software engineer. I'm a physician and an executive leader, and we're sort of taking this alchemy and building a platform that allows people to get better, faster, sooner, easier, without wearing out. And if you're a leader who's wanting to scale these things in your organization, and we say, hey, you're sitting on top of and leading, I don't know, 20 teams, 50, 100, all those teams aren't performing optimally, nor are all those leaders or individuals. How are you going to fix that, right? We need a scaling mechanism that's experiential. So that's probably my pet project right now. It's pretty interesting. We involve a lot
How
of.
do folks get a hold of you, Larry?
Just find me at larry@epidemicleadership.com. Send me an email if you like, and I'd love to talk to you about this because this thesis we've been talking about, can we get better, faster, sooner in the face of big challenges? If you're in the fire CMO, that's not going away. And so I think we need methodologies for scaling impact that don't depend on Lee or Larry go really hard and try to take a deep breath in once in a while and don't break. We need to get better than that. So it's kind of what we're doing in the lab, and the returns we're getting from people are what we hoped, right? I am getting better. We are getting better. We can see it. We can see the data and the patterns, and this is fun. And that to me tells me that there's some promise there. And yeah, we're gonna keep working on it.
I love it. I love it. And thank you for the honesty and the directness and all of your answers. This has been one of the most incredible, deep dive, insightful shows we've had. So thank you so much for being on the show, Larry.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate being here.
You have been listening to the Fire Chief Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the Chief Medical Officer. If you want to learn more about what it is like to be a CMO, check us out. Our website is thefirechiefcmo.com and connect with me on LinkedIn. Listen, stop pushing the damn boulder up the hill. Get all hands on deck and all of you push the boulder together. Let's do this together. Get out there, be a chief, and in the words of Sergeant Phil Esterhaus, be careful out there.